I always say this, but it's true once again that I'm so excited about today's conversation because I'm with the wonderful Dr. Lauren Costine, one of my dear friends and colleagues. We have so much in common, and every time I talk with her, I feel electrified. Lauren is a PhD. Lauren has many, many projects she's working on, and her focus is lesbians and queer women. Welcome to the Element Q podcast. I'm your host, TJ Woodward, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for this empowering journey. Each week, we shine a light on the authors, thought leaders, therapists, coaches, and healers of all types who are making a difference in the LGBTQ plus community. Together, we honor those who came before us, the courageous and resilient trailblazers who stood for our rights and recognition. Their strength laid the foundation we stand on today. Here, we celebrate their legacy by diving into the stories, insights, and tools that inspire gentleness, healing, and transformation. So get ready to be uplifted and empowered. This is the Element Q podcast. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, TJ. I'm really excited to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you. And
Yeah.
I do love being in conversation with you. And I over the years at conferences and at dinners and I just always feel enriched by you. I want to actually start because I know you and I were talking in the green room, which is of course just us sitting in the Zoom room. But in the green room, it sounds very formal, doesn't it? About all the different projects you're working on. So let's start there because I know you're up to a lot of amazing things.
Well, it was funny. I started with saying, I feel so connected to you in certain ways because we have this way of having these passion projects sort of going all the time, right? And I feel really grateful grateful and challenged by this brain that I have, which is, has a lot of ideas, has a lot of exciting things that it wants to get out there. And so, I've been in private practice for all my career. I've been in psychology for almost 25 years. And I know, and done a lot of other things, helped open up the LGBT specialization at Antioch University, worked at treatment centers, always saw private clients. But there was another brainchild I have, which was, having a therapy center that could take insurance. So in the pandemic, when things got so intense and was getting so many calls for therapy, my wife and I opened up what we call Awaken Therapy Center. And we're partnered with a couple insurance companies. And then now we have 12 therapists under us that take all of it. And it's a holistic, it's like mind, body, spirit focus, right? So that's one of, the things that I've been working on. And Vanessa is a wonderful person to partner with because she's operations and then I'm clinical. And then the other thing that was kind of brewing for a super long time, which is always like books and ideas and things like that. But I have a wonderful agent, and we were talking last year about, these books I'm working on. And together we came up with this idea of, for another part of what I do is called Dr. Lauren, the queer woman psychologist.
Mm.
And so with that, I have online courses for, queer women that really deal ongoingly with dysfunctional relationship patterns and can't seem to figure out how to get out of it. My books are under that, and I'm working on like a trilogy that's sort of just blossomed in
Mm.
my mind recently. And doing the social media, content, like getting out sort of the way I the way I work in the world and the way I have over 25 years seen healing, within myself and then being part of the community of just helping also heal others. Sort of how is that unfolding and how can I be a part of the world in, making this a better place or helping other people just heal. The idea for me is we all have so much potential. There's so much incredible beauty and love and um, radiance inside of us, and then that gets blocked. And how can we remove those blocks? How can we get rid of those internalized messages that hold us down and hold us back? And sort of, so the map of what I do is sort of that self-actualization process that Maslow's talked about. And then really the last part of his pyramid was the transformational process, which as a very spiritual person is another component that I do.
Wow, I love it. And of course, you know that you're singing my song and speaking my language when we're talking about this radiance that is the truth of who and what we are and how that gets blocked. And Element Q podcast is dedicated to having a conversation about the deeper healing within the LGBTQ plus community because it's so easy to talk about the conditions or the external conditions, which obviously are important. But this podcast, this conversation, and the reason I'm so grateful you're here with us today is to talk about that deeper healing. So it is true, in my experience, that we're all radiant beings, and then we get blocked. And let's talk a little bit about what those blocks might be. And if you want, you can speak to it specifically through the lens of your work with queer women. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you, how do we start to dismantle the blocks?
So, how I like to see it is there's like nature nurture meets,
Yeah,
right? So you come in with your own uniqueness, your own unique personality, and of course your essence, your spiritual essence, however anyone wants to sort of figure that out for themselves. And then that meets your parents, your home, your community, society. And the ego is also developing during that time. And the ego has a very important job. It's got to figure out how you can survive on this planet. But it creates a lot of conditioning internally that's, very negative, right? It's like it's defended, it's got dysfunctional coping mechanisms. It's like trying to figure its way out, and trying to figure how to survive. So it gets stuck in these survival mechanisms that are very blocking, of really like who we are. And so for me, I was born, I like to use myself as an instrument because I have never taken anyone on any journey unless I've actually tried it myself on some level. And it doesn't mean that everything I do works for everybody. It's just like, I'm not going to start saying, well, this is really great, but I don't know anything about it. I was born into a very conservative, conventional home, not religiously though, but sort of like I'm a recovering capitalist, is like what I say. My dad was like a business guy. And my parents, 80s. My dad's in his 80s now. So that generation, very different. And I was a very sensitive, queer little soul and very misunderstood. They just didn't know what to do. So around that, the feelings got bigger because I was never feeling seen or heard and
right.
just given an opportunity to be myself. It was very much like you be like this. So that's sort of how, I went out in the world. And then I was very shy and insecure. And then for me, because of the time I grew up, I came of age in the 80s. There was a backlash going on around after, the movements of the 60s and the 70s. So, the homophobia was really intense. Actually, there was a lot of phobia within the community around femme lesbians. So there was just all of these things that I was sort of trying to navigate. And it was very challenging. My mother was very homophobic. And so I just had to deal with this for the long. I was very closeted. My first girlfriend and I just absolutely hid it from everyone but our close circle. And, it just was very challenging and I was depressed and I didn't know it. There's all these things. And I was battling with an addiction. So for me, my first awakening was when I got sober. And it was right before I got sober and checked myself into treatment. I had a spiritual moment of like the curtain opened up. I connected to something much faster than me, and it said, you got to get rid of the alcohol. I mean, it was that simple. And I was like, oh, you're right. And that moment for me was everything. So I got to this treatment center and I'm sitting there and I'm like, just spend the next year figuring out why you've been drinking and doing risky behavior like this for so long. Like you can do that. And that was it. Like I just fell in love with healing myself first. And soon after that, I was in therapy and I looked at my therapist and I said, really interested in what you do. Now, mind you, I grew up in a family where we idealized famous people, money, people with a lot of money, beauty. Everything that was idealized had nothing to do with what I could tell was my inner calling. And what I could tell was what was needed for me to be able to live on this planet and not, and basically survive, honestly. At that point, it wasn't even about thriving, it was about surviving. So I went on this, the road less traveled, totally untraveled with anyone in my family. And I just went on this road. And it's been the most incredible journey. I mean, I'm so beyond grateful for it. And I mean, I just can't say that enough. And it was very hard. I don't want to like sugarcoat it for, anyone that knows this. There were a lot of moments that were very challenging, but being able to do the recovery work, looking at my part in things instead of looking at what everybody else was doing wrong was a very pivotal part of me. And then realizing that I had internalized a lot of messages that didn't have anything to do with my essence or who I really am or, what I really believe about myself, where my integrity comes from, where all of that is. And it took a long time because, I mean, I was a girl, I'm a woman, I grew up in a sexist, misogynistic world and a homophobic world. And the combination led to like a lot of things that I've had to undo. And even recently, getting myself out there with this new brand and everything, another layer of imposter syndrome showed itself. Because it's like, who am I to be expansive? Who am I to like really show myself and really be as, my full self that I can, with all my energy and all my intentions around this. And it's been fascinating to see that show up and see the layers of like internally of like, wow, I didn't know that it was there in that way.
Exactly. And it's interesting the way it can still show up for us, right? And there's so many things you said that I think are so rich, and anyone who's watching or listening right now, I'm sure can relate to this idea that in so many ways, queer people, gay people, lesbian people, whatever word we use to just define ourselves, and that's a whole topic we could spend an hour on, right? Because like my growing up, queer was the bad word, right? It was
I know,
we
me
played
too.
we played smear the queer, like that was the
Yes,
absolute worst, right? So to
yes.
embrace that is a process for me. But one of the things that you spoke about, which I think is really important, is this idea that we have to pretend to be someone who we are not. Now, I know that's common for a lot of people. It's not just unique to LGBTQ plus folks, but for us, I think we have even more of that because like I had to really pretend to be someone who I wasn't. And you named it, but like growing up, it was misogyny first. Don't look like a girl, don't talk like a girl. I say this all the time because that was my early experience. My earliest experience wasn't like, oh, I'm attracted to boys or that I'm, a gay boy. I didn't know that yet, but I was made fun of for being too effeminate. And so
Oh
I
God,
started like
yes.
trying to like be more masculine, whatever that meant. Act more like boys, pretend like I like sports, like all those gender roles. But what I want to kind of lean into is what you were speaking about. Like then we end up creating a facade, and of course, developing an ego is an important part of life on planet Earth. And yet, and I know in my own journey and almost everyone I've worked with, there's this idea that we start to believe we are that instead of this other essence of who we are. And there's a lot to unpack and dismantle. And when we're in that existential crisis, because that's really what it is, I look around at our community and think, how come everyone's not addicted to drugs and alcohol? I mean, we obviously know addiction rates are higher in the queer community. And I think that's a big part of it. Shame, disconnection, pretending to be someone who we're not. So as we start to, move into recovery or come into therapy or, start to look at like our own wellness, our own journey, how do we start to address these and dismantle these? I know it can be a process, but what are some of the ways that you've healed and some of the ways you've seen other people start to do their healing?
I think the most important, the first foundation always is awareness.
Yeah.
So, the false self and the ego together, they create this block of really understanding what's going on, as you just
Mm,
said, right? So the false self is moving through going, well, I am, this person that cares about this, and this because I want, to be liked. And I don't want to feel the shame I have inside of myself because I wasn't allowed to be who I really am because society said, no, 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 that's not how, people are. They have to be a certain way. And so, it's about, and however that was, for me, it was my first awareness moment. I mean, there were little seeds being planted, don't get me wrong. There was like these moments of like, wow, this really isn't working. That existential
right.
crisis you were talking about, like, this is not working, but I didn't know how. I just
Mm,
needed that moment, that real deep moment. And that was the biggest gift because of the awareness that happened. And in that moment, the false self and the ego had no, they were gone.
mm,
And so, not everybody needs that, though. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that moment of awareness, that moment of insight was the first step, right? So, as soon as you have those moments of like, something isn't right, I don't feel good, I don't love myself, or I'm very critical of others, or I'm very critical of myself, or like, I'm just, you know, I really like David Hawkins' like levels of consciousness where he does, it's like there's this level here, and underneath that's very negative. It's blame, it's shame, it's anger, and you can see that, and the world gets very stuck in that. And then that level of courage is when we pop over that. So, but the courage has to come from within. I know you know that, right? We have to find that in ourselves, and everybody has it. And, everyone's called too, but a lot of times we will ignore the first call or the second call or the third call. And eventually, hopefully, you'll get that moment of courage and you'll be like,
mm,
okay, I got to do something about this. Now, what does that mean? Of course, I'm biased. I think therapy is essential because you get a relationship with someone that is absolutely going to see and hear you in a way that you're not going to just get out in the world, recovery programs, groups. Um, and for me, I'm a huge believer in meditation.
yeah.
So I've been meditating for 20 something years. I meditate now at least 6 days a week. It's essential. Even if I only can get 15 minutes in, it's better than nothing. And that has created what, is called that meta awareness, right? So when I'm, working with folks and I start talking about like, let's just get 5, 10 minutes of like some sort of meditation, I've always called it taking the mind to the gym, right? So when we take the mind to the gym, it's like just like, doing biceps for your muscles, right? You're actually slowly creating this level, this like zoom out. I call, zoom out. And let's start looking at what's going on underneath with the thoughts, with the different parts inside of yourself, with the thing that's bringing the most angst, with the thing that makes you so unhappy. Also, really importantly, with like how you truly feel about yourself. Are you really struggling with self-abandonment and
Mm,
and feelings of not being good enough? I mean, there's the three, right? Love, worthiness, and capability. Where are those areas you don't feel good enough? For us, LGBTQ folks, feeling worthy, that can be really damaged. Feeling lovable, a lot of us are really capable. I mean, there's a lot of it. I mean, we sort of like, we can really get stuff done. I mean, I think it's very impressive,
yeah.
right? But the lovability and the self-love and feeling really worthy just inherently because of who your essence is, just deep down, that part has usually been pretty blocked.
Well, and you're speaking to something that I think is vitally important, and I want to lean in because I think it's so crucial in this conversation. When you say we meditate, you didn't say this exactly, but this is a paraphrase. We meditate so that we can have an expanded awareness. Because if I don't have the expanded awareness, then the unconscious programming will dictate my life, right? That is just something that I've experienced in my own life, and it's something that I see in the world in general. In other words, we're either unconsciously or consciously creating our life moment to moment. And the
Right.
conscious choice literally can't be made if I'm not aware that I have the ability to do so. So if I'm stuck in, some of the sort of those lower levels of consciousness, right? And they're not bad or wrong. It's just, it's a lower
They certainly
level of
make you
awareness.
unhappy, though.
That's
They
right.
make you
That's the key, right? I have more
unhappy.
frustration. I have more difficulty when I'm vibrating there. So it's literally as we have this expanded awareness, we can start to realize, I think it's a twofold process. And you spoke to this. One, it's connecting with that essence so that that can expand, so that I can move into these higher levels of awareness. And two, pretty much questioning and unlearning all those programs. And I love what you're pointing to because it's at the root of my work, which are these core false beliefs, which have a frequency attached to them. Yes, I understand that thoughts create reality, but there's something much deeper, and that's that frequency
Exactly.
that's attached. And that's what I want to lean into because, someone asked me a while ago, well, if it's trapped in the unconscious and the unconscious is running the show, if it's unconscious, how do you possibly change it? Because you don't even know it's happening. I'm gonna pass that one to you. I don't know if that was a sports reference, but I'm gonna pass that to you, Lauren, because I mean I can say a lot about it, but if it's true that the unconscious is running the show and we want a different result in our life, how do we start to work with that?
Well, I think everybody, look, in our Constitution, it says the pursuit of happiness. I mean, this is a fundamental human desire.
Yes.
Everyone's trying to find happiness,
Mhm.
fulfillment, meaning, love, connection, community. Everybody, everybody. So, the idea is really understanding. And, thankfully, there's a something exploded in, COVID where there was just like a breakthrough of like this stuff is everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Just like, you know, if you are really struggling, if you really are unhappy, if you're not reaching your potential, if you feel into something, like I know it could be different, that's when you start on the road of
Mhm.
inner work. And I call it inner work. And I truly believe, I mean, my first psychology founder love was Jung, and
Yeah.
he had this concept of the shadow.
Yeah.
And for me, when I started thinking about the shadow, I was like, oh, it makes sense. That's where I put all that stuff. It doesn't make me
That's
bad.
right.
Everybody's got it.
Yes.
So, really finding ways to talk to people who are safe, who are going to listen, who are curious, who are empathic and compassionate and hold space for you. There's something very magical about talking about what's going on internally inside of yourself and having a safe space to do that. It allows insights to occur. I mean, I see it every day with my clients. They'll be talking and then they'll go, "Oh, wait, I just got this. I just got this. Okay, and I mean, I'm very interactive, so I'm working with them on it. But our shame tells us to keep this hidden, to keep this
Yeah.
secret, to keep this away from everybody. I don't say just go and find anyone to talk to this
Right.
about,
Right.
but go and find somebody to start talking to this about. Journaling is incredible. I mean, I love the morning pages. I've been doing that off and on for years. Any way to start just letting those parts of yourself have a voice, right? The parts that feel shame, feel not worthy, feel ugly, feel whatever, let them start expressing themselves.
Yeah, and you said two things that I think are vitally important. First, find a safe place, right? So we're not just going to go tell everyone everything, but we're going to find a safe place. Now, that term has, in my opinion, and I'm going to sound like a Gen X right now, but I think we've changed the meaning of a safe place to we're going to have a group of people who don't disagree with us. And I actually don't think that's safe at all. I think that's actually quite unsafe. I'll be controversial and say that. A truly safe place is to be seen and valued and being held. And we talk about holding space, right? As clinicians, what do we actually do? We don't heal anybody. We hold a space for them to start doing their own healing. And that's the second thing you said that I think is so important. And that is when the safety gets created. And in my work, Conscious Recovery, I identify the very first step of recovery as creating safety. And that there's a tendency to think that creating safety is external, which it is. It's also internal. And a lot of
Very.
times we start with the external first. I know I did. It was like, oh, let me find some safe groups and some safe people, a good therapist. And then ultimately it was like, oh, true safety actually is an inner experience. And that
Yeah.
safety is to start bringing the shadow, because I love Jung too, and I love the shadow work, bringing the shadow up into conscious awareness so that we can start to make conscious choices. And that's where that expanded awareness comes in. You talked about something that I absolutely relate to. When my first book, Conscious Being, was published in 2015, on published date, Lauren, I thought, oh, this will be the happiest day of my life. My book is coming out. I've been working on it for 3 years. I had the most intense shame spiral on the day it was published, and I could not describe to anyone what that was about. I wasn't looking for why is this happening. I was aware that the shadow was coming up, and it's this interesting paradox. The way we heal shame is we bring it into the light. We bring it into the light with safe people and ultimately safe with self so we can be vulnerable and transparent, just like you said publishing a book, I was like, oh, it just went to the entire world. I don't know if anyone's going to read it. That was also a thought. I don't know if anyone's going to read it, but oh my gosh, there was this. I wanted so desperately to have my message out, but I also kind of so desperately wanted to keep hidden a little bit.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh my God. I think that's a really perfect example. I can so relate, by the way, because I think, courage, I mean, when I learned that definition in recovery, I was like, it's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I think a lot of people don't realize that those who are those of us that put ourselves out there or have done well and are successful, like, don't feel fear. Yeah, no.
Absolutely.
But I think it's, all of the things that you just said are so important. And yes, so making the unconscious conscious, showing up, starting to create space inside that's safe to feel all of it.
Yeah.
All of it. I'll tell you, I don't know how much time we have, but I'll tell you one of my first real experiences with what I would call toxic shame,
Yeah.
which is a John Bradshaw, and he's sort of, he's old school, but I love him so
Love
much.
John. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we were developing the human sexuality class at Antioch for the LGBT specialization. The human sexuality class at the time was extremely hetero. So we were, making it very intersectional inclusive. Well, we were in a group and we were all talking and we sort of, Antioch's about sharing and sort of, being brave. And I talked about something. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I talked about something regarding my own sexuality and me as a sexual woman in
Yeah.
this world and a sexual lesbian in this world.
Yeah.
And the next day, I'm not kidding you, the next day I'm walking in my kitchen, I'm going, oh my God, what did I just do? What did I do? What did I do? And I was able in that moment to recognize that the toxic shame was moving through me.
Yes.
And I saw it just moving through and out. And I was like, I can survive this. It's
Yes.
very uncomfortable. I could curl up in a ball and just like hide for the rest of my life. I started seeing eyeballs everywhere looking at me and judging and going
Mm.
like this. And then it just kept moving and moving and moving. And it was like the most incredible healing experience possible.
Well, and that's so helpful for someone to hear because I think sometimes, and I'll say I in this case, sometimes I think healing is always just going to have this really feel good, quality to it, which sometimes it does, right? But there's also these moments where I have the courage to reveal, and then the shame spiral comes. And then, like you said, I call it the rubber band effect. I know I didn't make that up, but it's like the oh shit moment, like, oh, I can't believe I just said
Yes,
that.
right. Just
Right.
take it back.
But it's also something much more visceral in the body, right? Because as we know, the trauma is stored in the body and shame is stored in the body. And it's living in the shadow. And when we bring it to light, yes, we're going to have relief, but first we might have the experience of a shame spiral. And sometimes I think it's easy for people to go into the wrongness of that. But what I hear you saying, which I think is so important for people to hear, that is the wonderful thing. It might not feel good. We're not going to pretend like it feels good. But when that happens, when I have courage and I'm authentic, when the next day I wake up feeling hungover or a shame spiral or like not leaving the house, I get to honor that and realize that you said something so beautiful. It's moving through me. I'm
Yeah,
releasing it. It's actually coming
right.
out. And I remember sometimes I was doing like some of the deep work when I was doing the trauma work and some of my sexual trauma healing. I would get physically sick for 72 hours
Yes.
after I
Oh,
shared things.
yes.
And I thought that is so interesting that there's so
Right.
much power in the shadow and what I've buried and the trauma that's stored in the tissues of our body that literally cause physical illness. And at first I thought there's something wrong. And then I realized, no, this is it. It's getting worked out. It's a
That's
beautiful,
right.
beautiful thing.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
we're actually, I feel like we could do a whole
I think so
hour.
too, because I'm like, wait, I didn't get into triggers, but we'll save that for the next
Right.
time.
Yeah, let's do a second show. I love that. But is
Yeah.
there something, gosh, there's so many questions I could ask you, Lauren. Is there something in your mind, on your heart that wants to be shared kind of for our last little conversation before we close?
Yeah. I mean, really, I just want to invite everybody to do this work because it's really how the whole planet is going to heal. Because each of us are really projecting our shadow stuff all over the world and thinking that it's everybody else's problem or fault or what have you. And it's very easy to get stuck in blame because that's sort of like an easy go-to, but it absolutely serves us on no level. It just gets us really caught in it's an external shame spiral, right? It's not internal, but it's avoiding the work. And when we do these things, like have these moments of healing or, 72 hours of not feeling well, you're developing what I call is this, and the internal resilience piece starts to just move and move and move. And then the next thing you know, there's more expansiveness inside.
That's right.
And that's where you get it doesn't mean you don't have a trigger that makes a, bad day or a bad moment, but they are fewer and far between, and you start feeling this, and then you really can get out. You start feeling into being lovable, being worthy. It's not an intellectual idea, it's an actual embodied experience,
That's
and
right.
that's worth the work.
And that's when everything changes. And what I want to say to echo what you said, it's really a call to action for our community. And when I say our community, I mean LGBTQ plus, because I think there's such a tendency to be in the blame and in the reactivity and in the woundology. And I want to always start by saying I honor it and I recognize it, and I've been there. And it must be a part of the process because it's what I see people doing. And what I hear Lauren, what I hear you saying, and Dr. Lauren is inviting us to heal that so that we cannot stay in that frequency, because love is actually what's going to heal not only our community, but that's that ripple effect that happens in the world. And when I'm in resistance, as tempting as it is, I just create more resistance. So I always like to say, rather than saying something's right or wrong, I ask what gets created when I. So what gets created when I'm in the
Right.
fight and in the blame, and what gets created when I'm in the love and the connection. And then the valuable question for me is, what is required of me in order to be that more in the world? And that's how we get to be beneficial presences on the planet. And there's no greater gift than being of service in the world in that way. That is so enriching. And that's where what you said is so beautiful. So, oh my gosh, Dr. Lauren, thank you so much. I love you. I
Thank
appreciate you.
you. I
We'll
love
have
you
your full
too.
bio. Everyone will have her full bio in the show notes.
That was so, I love what you just said. Thank you so much. That was such a great closing. It was perfect, beautiful, and I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. It's really essential because I do see our community. We deserve this. We need, we deserve this.
And
Yeah.
it's time.
And it's time.
And
It's
this is the
time.
moment. And here we go, everyone. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. We're
Thank
definitely going to
you.
do a part 2 down the road. Peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Element Q podcast. It's an honor to walk this path of healing and transformation with you. Remember, the courage and resilience of those who came before us live on in each of us. Let's continue to carry their legacy forward as we support one another in creating a world filled with love, gentleness, and empowerment. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we're building a brighter future, one story at a time. Until next time, I'm TJ Woodward, and this has been the Element Q podcast.